Is my judge ready?
Yes.
My opponent's ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Partner?
Yes.
Okay. Greetings. My partner and I stand affirming this year's resolution about legal immigration and offer the following plan. The United States federal government should substantially reduce its restrictions on legal immigration to the United States by adopting an open border policy for immigration. Contention 1 is inherency. Trump is reducing legal immigration now. That's Halsenher and Vautran in 18. The Trump administration is making inroads into another longtime priority, reducing legal immigration. The number of people receiving visas to move permanently to the United States is on pace to drop 12%. Contention 2 is solvency. Open borders increase immigration flows without risking harm to U.S. citizens. That's Dalmia in 12. Under such a system, employers and individuals would apply to the government to bring in a foreigner. The government could reject those who failed a background check and were afflicted with some contagious disease. By barring that, entry would be allowed. Contention 3 is the economy advantage. 1. America's workforce is aging and immigration is necessary to accelerate U.S. economic growth. That's Thompson in 18. Studies suggest as rich countries like the U.S. get older, their productivity rates naturally decline. The trick is raising the GDP if productivity levels are subdued is more workers. Achieving higher growth without another baby boom or accelerated productivity isn't difficult. If this country simply let in more immigrants, GDP growth would almost surely accelerate. 2. American economic growth powers the global economy, and any decline would be felt worldwide. That's Rose in 17. Because of its size and interconnectedness, developments in the U.S. economy are bound to have important effects around the globe. The U.S. has the world's single largest economy, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP. A surge in U.S. growth could provide a significant boost to the global economy. Shocks to the U.S. economy transmit to the rest of the world. And 3. Our impact is armed conflict. Economic growth is necessary to prevent it. That's Cartwright in 16. Connections between development and peace are firmly supported by research. Economic growth rates are significantly correlated with peace. Irrespective of all other variables, poverty, measuring low-income bars, there's a strong relationship to civil conflict.
Cool.
Thus, we affirm.
Are we all set for cross-examination? Awesome. So my first question, so the United States opens its borders. How do we know more immigrants are going to come to the U.S.?
Sure, so what we can see is specifically that there's a high growth of people that want to come to the United States, and that's why when we see that the Trump administration is reducing legal immigration now, then it's pretty self-explanatory that there's obviously going to be a peak in that once we take away those restrictions that are currently in effect.
And why do people want to come to the U.S.?
There's a lot of reasons, job opportunities, there's a lot more safety and things like that.
Okay, cool. So my next question, you said that the United States economy is key to the global economy. In 2008,
yes,
the United States had a recession caused by a housing crisis.
Sure.
What armed conflicts happened as a result?
So what we're looking for specifically is the direction between economic growth and increase of peace. So the United States has been at war with people for the majority of the time that it's even been around. So we're not necessarily looking to prevent a specific conflict. We're looking to sort of preempt any further conflicts and also hopefully decrease the conflicts that we're in the status quo.
First, I'll start with the disadvantage, and then I'll move to solvency. Uniqueness. All wages are currently growing, but low-skilled wage growth is vulnerable. That's Bosler 6-1. A long-awaited pickup in wage growth to accompany the robust U.S. labor market appears to be finally taking shape. Average hourly earnings rose 2.8% in the year through May, and retail wage growth took a big hit due to fallout in that sector from the structural shift towards online shopping. But it's not all good news. Wage growth in the sector with the lowest average hourly wage, leisure and hospitality, mainly restaurants and hotels, continues to decelerate. Link. The plan allows for an influx of immigrants that crashes wages for low-skilled American laborers, increasing income inequality. That's Borjas 16. When the supply of wages goes up, the price that firms have to pay for hire workers goes down. Immigrants admitted in the past 2 decades have increased the size of low-skilled workforce by roughly 25%. And as a result, the earnings of this particularly vulnerable group dropped. The fiscal burden offsets the gain from the immigrant surplus, so it's not too far-fetched to conclude that immigration has barely affected the total wealth of natives at all. Instead, it's changed how the pie is split, with the losers, the workers who compete with immigrants, sending roughly $500 billion check annually to the winners. Those winners are primarily their employers. Impact. Income inequality makes society unhealthier and more violent. That's Pickett and Wilkinson 17. Health and social problems are indeed more common in countries with bigger income inequalities. These two are closely related. The problems in rich countries are not caused by the society not being rich enough, but by the material differences between people within each society being too big. Large inequalities produce problems associated with social differences. They also weaken community life, reduce trust, and increase violence. Rates of mental illness are 3 times as high in the most unequal societies compared with the least unequal societies. Similarly, in more unequal societies, people are almost 10 times as likely to be imprisoned and 2 or 3 times as likely to be clinically obese, and murder rates may be many times higher.
Okay, so in your link card, you talk about how the plan is going to be increasing the amount of immigrants into the United States, therefore causing this sort of economic crash for low-skilled workers. But does this evidence account for our 2018 card that specifically talks about how the worker age in America is increasing, therefore we need an influx of people into the workforce?
It does account for that because before immigrants come into the country, the wages would have already dropped.
Okay. My next question specifically is about the same argument. Do you have any empirical examples of when the United States has seen a massive influx of immigrants coming into the U.S. and a subsequent economic crash or an increase in income inequality?
While there may not be specific examples, theory generally suggests that this is exactly what would happen when there's a large influx of immigrants into the country.
Okay, so another kind of related question to that. Due to the recent cuts that the Trump administration has made to legal immigration, have we seen any sort of economic increase because of this, directly caused by it?
Okay, so first I will expand on our sovereignty and advantage, then I will move on to answers to the disadvantage. Okay. Immigration is necessary to accelerate the U.S. economic growth. Boost to the U.S. economy is a boost to the global economy. As my partner mentioned, with an aging workforce, it is necessary to expand our workforce with an open border policy. The affirmative reduces exploitation. Current immigration policies make some workers afraid to report abuses. 2017. Undocumented workers are refusing to cooperate with U.S. Department of Labor. Investigations due to deportation fears in some cases even declining to accept back wages owed to them. But as the Trump administration has increasingly instilled fear and anxiety in immigrant communities, the Department of Labor, Labor Wage and Hour Division has struggled to communicate with undocumented workers. As a result, it is becoming easier for employers to mistreat and underpay workers. There is no link and no turn to the disadvantage. Immigrants don't hurt wages, they boost them. Florida 2017. A diverse population of immigrants improves the economy for everyone. When immigrants in a metro area come from many different countries, the wages and productivity of the metro area rises across the board. Also, the disad is non-unique. Wages will probably crash, but there is no evidence that proves that this crash will be due to immigration. Also, the negative is contradictory. They state that the wages are growing, but low-skilled wages are vulnerable. There are already immigrants in the United States, so this would have already happened in the status quo. Prefer our impact because global armed conflict would impact people on a larger scale, and there is no correlation between income inequality and violence. If it were so, considering that there is income inequality now, then the disad would have already happened. Thank you. I now stand ready for cross-examination.
Will there be a significant influx of immigrants post-plan?
Post-plan? I would assume that it would. My evidence indicates that.
Then how does your plan avoid the link to the DA in that section when your defense is that there are already immigrants in the U.S.?
Yes, that was stated in our inherency, is that there's that influx of, hello, sorry, I didn't understand that question. Let me start over anyway. Repeat your question, please.
Of course, so how does your plan avoid the link to the DA in that scenario when your defense is that there are already immigrants in the U.S.?
Well, I say that there is no link because your link was more so talking about wages, potentially crashing it if there was an influx of immigrants, but there's no evidence to support that claim.
However, you do believe that there would be an influx of immigrants post-plan.
With an open borders policy, there would be an influx of immigrants. That's the goal of the affirmative.
My 2NC is just going to be the disadvantage. Post-plan, the United States looks like Miami in the 1980s. There's tons of new workers without much experience tanking the wages of all of the unskilled natives and former immigrants that are already in the city. Except it's going to be in the U.S. on a much larger scale. There are a couple reasons why this is bad. First, magnitude. Income inequality outweighs armed conflict because increased rates of obesity and mental health disorders result when you have an artificially divisions of people among large amounts of the population. Second is risk. Income inequality is already happening in the United States and it's driving increasing crime rates. Wage growth is going to prevent this from spilling over to larger effects. However, when the plan undermines wage growth by allowing a ton of new immigrants into the U.S., that means that all of these problems are going to be compounded, and we're going to have increasing violence and increasing obesity rates, which tanks the health of U.S. citizens. Now, third is time frame. There is an immediate post-plan impact. They conceded this in the cross-examination of both speeches, that the immigrants come over immediately and act right after the plan. So this means that the wages are going to tank immediately because the companies know that there are going to be workers coming in. Now, they say no Lincoln turn. However, there's no turn. The Florida evidence is from some creativity presser from Canada. You should prefer our evidence because he's a Harvard economist citing actual case studies. Also, there's no explanation about what anything means in the Florida evidence. You can look at the card yourself. Now, I'm going to read some more evidence from from Borjas right now. The Mariel boat lift proves that massive fluxes of immigrants depress low-scale wages. That's Borjas in 16. He's a professor of economics and social policy at Harvard. The narrative that immigrant supporters use to justify their freer borders is that immigrants do jobs that natives don't want to do and so have little impact on job opportunities. David Card's study of the Mariel supply shock stands as a landmark contribution to that narrative. Within a span of just a few weeks, over 100,000 Marielitos arrived in Miami in the spring of 1980. I decided to revisit the Mariel episode to see for myself what the data actually showed. The Marielitos had indeed depressed the average wage of comparable workers. The trick to unlocking the puzzle was to account for the fact that nearly two-thirds of Marielitos were high school dropouts, increasing the number of low-skill workers in Miami by 20%. It does not take a PhD in statistics to see that something did happen in Miami beginning around 1980, with the low-skill market bottoming out in 1985 and recovering by 1990. Timothy also says that there's no uniqueness. Cool.
Okay, so according to you, you stated that the Mariel boat lift proves that mass influx of immigrants depresses low-skilled wages.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and did that happen with an open borders policy?
The Mariel boat lift took place without any open borders policy in the U.S. However, it would look like the results of the Mariel boat lift, which were when 10,000 immigrants came over from Cuba and into Miami at the same period of time. It's the most similar thing to compare to.
Do you have any empirical examples that show that increased immigration leads to an increase in income inequality?
Increased immigration, yes. The Mariel boat lift is one of the many case studies that Borjas cites.
But with
Open borders policy, no, because the U.S. has never adopted an open borders policy.
Okay, so you don't have any evidence that proves that an open borders policy.
Right, because the U.S., like most countries, has never enacted a full open borders policy. So this
my
is
next
a
question
baseline
then would
hypothetical
be,
speculation.
how does the app uniquely cause a disadvantage if that can happen
Sure.
in the status quo
Because
without
reforms
the
that
open borders
were,
policy?
because amounts of immigration that were not even close to a full open borders policy have caused these drops in wage growth. If the U.S. opened its borders totally, that would have a comparatively much higher effect on lowering wages.
I'm going to finish up the DA. They say that there's no evidence that immigration lowers wages. However, evidence has already shown that wage growth in the field of leisure and hospitality has already decelerated, and that's Bosler. They say that current immigration should have triggered the link, but this does not account for the large influx of immigrants post-plan that would trigger ensuing links, and that's Borjas. They say that there's no correlation between income inequality and violence, but evidence has shown that in more unequal societies, murder rates are 10 times higher, and that's Pickett and Wilkinson.
Okay, so I'm just going to be going over like the main points in the debate, mostly on the DA. Everyone ready? Okay. First, you have to look to the fact that my opponent's argument is completely non-unique. They say that their Bosler evidence proves that an influx of immigrants will undermine wage growth. However, this is false for three reasons. First, it's not plan specific, so it happened without an open border policy. Second, you can extend our Thompson and 18 evidence because their study doesn't actually account for the current aging workforce, which is going to be solving for this issue of an influx of immigrants. And third, our evidence all post-dates theirs. It's all from 2018 and 2017, whereas the card that they are continuing referencing is from 2016, so you should prefer our evidence. Second, you can look to the fact that they have no link to their actual dissad because the status quo proves that income inequality is non-unique to an increase or decrease in the immigration. Also, you can look to the fact that they have no link to their impact because there's income inequality in the status quo already. Also, even if you want to buy their impact of increasing health problems, our impact outweighs on severity and magnitude. You can extend the Cartwright and 16 evidence that we read because global armed conflict affects more people in a more severe way. So you can see that in the affirmative world, we're going to see a decrease of exploitation of low-wage workers and preventing further armed conflict.
So the one here does an awesome job on the magnitude debate about why a global armed conflict would affect more people. However, they have conceded the risk debate, which is that income inequality is an already happening systemic impact. However, wage growth, as indicated by our Bosler evidence, is going to correct for it. However, they kill wage growth, which means that there's going to be persistent effects from income inequality. So the risk of this is 100%. Meanwhile, their armed conflict didn't happen after the 2008 recession. They talk about why impact is not unique. That should have triggered their impact much more. Their internal link chain is much more unlikely. You have to err out on the pure side of, you have to err neg on the pure side of risk because we're the only one with the likely impact. I'm going to go to the answers that they had. So they start off talking a lot about uniqueness. They say that it's not plan specific. However, our link is what makes uniqueness plan specific. That's how that works. And our link is that when you increase the amount of immigrants over a specific small period of time, that's going to tank wages. So that's a Borjas evidence. Second, they say that their evidence. They say the Thompson 18 talks about the aging crisis. Sure, doesn't matter because they're in the short-term crashing wage. The aging crisis happens later. Third, they say that post-date. Our evidence is from June 1st. That's a lie. They also say there's no to the data because income inequality is non-unique. However, that's not true. If you look at the Borjas evidence, it indicates exactly how that works.
The alpha is more advantageous than a negative. Our advantages outweigh any potential negative disadvantage. Open borders will not risk the livelihood of Americans. It is beneficial for a strong economy and progressive country. GDP growth would accelerate. Open borders will boost global economy. Economic growth is key to avoid armed conflict. Passing the ALP plan will reduce exploitations and boost global economy. There are no empirical examples that show an increase in immigration with an open border policy. Or leads to income inequality. They say that immigrants crash wages but have no empirical evidence to prove this point. In our Florida 17 evidence, it states that immigrants won't depress wages. They boost them. There is no link. Judge, there is no reason to vote against the affirmative, especially when the negative has only provided assumptions and told you what could probably happen. Prefer the app because the advantages outweigh the disad. Our impact has a larger magnitude. Negative has no empirical evidence to support their claims. Thank you for voting for me.
Good debate.
Thank you.